Hello, folks, and welcome to somehow episode 7 of TalkiNindies. Credit to all the people who've contributed and helped keep this keep this train wreck moving. This week we have a new person who's contributed. His name's hopefully I don't mess up the pronunciation of name. David Palardy, or that's what I'm going to go with. My apologies, David, if I mispronounced your name or butchered it in any way. This week we're got about 3 different questions, and we'll just jump right in. The first one is what is one indie game that you want more people to play, something overlooked or less discussed that made an impact on you or you enjoyed so much that you'll forever beat the drum to try to get others to try it. Now, this one's tough for me because getting anything down to one game tends to be a problem. So what I decided to do was I picked games from every year that stand out in some way to me for more personal reasons, and I also tried to not pick games that I've tended to discuss more at length before, just to be fair, because everything's about giving. You'll find with me, everything's about giving exposure to as many different games as possible, and even games that I love, I don't want to just heap praise on the same things over and over again, because it's tiresome, A, and B, it just seems like it's ignoring what my entire channel and everything is about, which is to keep finding the new different things to focus on, so that people see things that that A, they haven't heard me talk about, and B, stuff that they may not have ever even considered. So I decided to go that direction, and I picked a pretty eclectic and very different group of games every year. The genres swing pretty significantly, so bear with me. From 2017, the game I chose is it's called Rocket Fist. It's a game that it's probably the game that I would think is the least talked about out of all the games that I'm talking about. I don't think I've probably ever seen anybody else mention it. It doesn't help that it came out in the first year of the Switch's lifespan, before it had gotten more popular, I guess even before some of the more popular indie games had arrived, so that maybe the scene just wasn't developed enough at the time. But there's something I really liked about Rocket Fist in terms of its flow. In the original review I wrote, I noted that it felt a lot like the original Bomberman that I'd played on the Super Nintendo with friends. There's just something about it plays very differently. It's more like dodgeball with fists that can get powered up, that you're trying to ricochet off of different walls, and you can get different power-ups that make you more powerful in certain ways. But you'll generally throw your fist hoping to hit somebody, and then when you have to go pick it back up, type of thing, or at least most of the time you do. But the thing that was cool about it was, aside from the multiplayer, which was fun, and as many, even now, as many multiplayer games as I've played on Switch, where my family and I have gotten pretty jaded, it still stands out as sort of doing its own thing and having its own ideas. Not necessarily terribly complex, but it got what it was doing right, which sometimes that's all that matters. And then the other thing about it that is a standout is its single player campaign is actually far better than you could ever probably expect. I think the expectation of how a single player Bomberman style goes tends to be really low because of in general, the relatively poor quality of what Hudson was putting into their single player campaigns. I mean, they were playable, and there have been better and worse ones, but they never necessarily stood out as being particularly noteworthy or exciting. In many ways, I usually think of, Rocket Fist as one, as a game in that general style that got it right in a better way. And then the other one that stands out is, now my brain is not, it's not, Bomb Slinger. That's another one where it has a more roguelike take on the Bomberman franchise. I think both of those have a better single-player campaign than Bomberman does. So for Rocket Fist to be distinctive and fun in multiplayer, and then to have a single-player campaign that I consider memorable, I still remember the last guy you face, Uncle Knuckles. There's just something really fun about that game that, and like I said, I think out of all the games that I'm talking about today, I think it's the one that I've heard the least about. So in particular, that one's worth shining some light on. In 2018, my one that I chose it's called Pool Panic. Another that I don't think I really have heard people talk about much, certainly not people giving it props. This one is more of a connection. I mean, the game is still notable, but there's more of a connection because it was a game that I first got to check out at PAX, and I actually had spent some time with the two developers behind it, and it was just their enthusiasm for what they'd built, and just the really they were two guys that were really into what they'd built, and they were really passionate about it, and you could really see it in the game. The game is really an oddball. It's sort of a puzzle game, sort of an adventure, sort of an action game. It's really hard to describe. You'd almost have to play it to find out what it's like. But in general, you play as a cue ball, and your character's sort of a cue ball, and your goal is to knock the other balls into the pockets that are around in a variety of different ways. But it's just every stage is a little different and a little strange, and the way you have to find success to get them off of the screen is almost always different. And one of the things that amazed me about it was, as a programmer, was that I was seeing, when I played the demo and when I played the final game, you would see mechanics that were really different. Like, it would just, the way it worked, the way the level worked was so different from the other ones, that it was one of those things where I think I even asked them at the time. It was like, oh, okay, so on this circus level, there's this mechanic that feels different where you bounce, and then there was a motorcycle level where you were trying to move between motorcycles essentially to knock the guys off, and the way those played was very different. And it was like, you would have had to have programmed all these things independently. And then one of the programmer, he was like, yeah, when we get a great idea, I had to go in there and we had to make it work, and there was just a lot of love in it. And usually when you see, there's sort of a jack of all trades, master of none risk that you run when you start doing that too much. And you see it in games that, overextend and can't quite keep it all together or keep this consistent quality throughout. And they pulled off a pretty impressive, like they did it. And it's a really quirky, strange, to me, wonderful game. It's one of those that I put near the top of my love on my weird list, and I love games on the weird list. Like, it's really hard for me. It was hard for me not to have chosen weird games for every year for this list, but I deliberately didn't, because, again, I'm trying to find games that are in every possible direction that are unrecognized, and it's all about spreading the love to as many games as possible. But yeah, Pool Panic, if you're open to something a little odd, it doesn't go on sale too often, but it is a very distinct game that I enjoyed a lot, and I loved the variety, and I loved never knowing what to expect for every level that I went on. I didn't know what to expect, and that was really fun. 2019, sort of a what may be a radical choice because it's a casual game, or it's sort of casual. Um, so there have been a lot of attempts to uh, come at the Picross style of game, and Picross S8 just came out and is amazing. The addition of multiplayer to it, really, I had a great time playing it with with / against my wife, because it is sort of cooperative because you're both trying to solve the same puzzle at the same time. But since it keeps score of who got more spots, it gets very competitive very quickly. And she was very upset because in general I was quicker at getting to, if you have a 15 by 15 puzzle, if you get the 15 lines, I would tend to be quicker to get to those, and she was very upset because I was already ahead, and it was sort of cheating. But it makes for a entertaining game, and it was when you get to the end and you're both trying to figure out what's incorrect. It is fun to work cooperatively and try to figure it out. But aside, we're not talking about Picross in this case. But a lot of games have tried that formula. So you've got the pixel colors, you've got Pick-a-Pix, you've got what's the other one? You've got Pictui, that's a Picross style, and I think there's one more that I'm neglecting, which makes me feel bad because I try to I try not to lose track. But anyway, the one that is different than all of them, that did things its own way that I can really respect, it's called Travel Mosaics. And there's actually many of them. I think I only reviewed 3 of them, but there's more than that. And they really come from the casual space. I think they pre-existed already on mobile and stuff like that. But the thing I respect about it, and it's different, and I even in emails to responding to Jupiter when the new Picross would come out, because they had stagnated a little bit before this multiplayer update. They'd gone a couple versions where they hadn't really done much different. It was more great puzzles with their great interface. So it was all clean and worked well, but they weren't necessarily innovating. So I actually had pointed them to Travel Mosaics to say, not to say that you guys should be doing this, but here's what your competition that is trying to do something different than you guys are is doing, because everybody else has colors. The clip Picross, where you unlock a larger mosaic kind of thing, that you have you've unlocked a larger one that you're doing pieces of, so it's harder to work out the clips because they don't tend to be symmetrical. They're part of a greater design, so sometimes they can be more challenging because you have nothing to go on to like figure out what it looks like at any point, because it could just be a piece of something bigger and doesn't necessarily have to make sense. Oh, the other one that was notable that's in that vein but does something different as well, is Depiction. That one's freaking hard. Having to layer different colors with Picross to make combined colors, that definitely adds a layer of craziness to the mix that is definitely notable. But anyway, with Travel Mosaics, the thing that I liked about those is they skip away from there being a need to have a tutorial. For people new to the genre, that might not be very friendly, but all their puzzles tend to be really big, and there's a lot of them, and I appreciated that to begin with. But the other thing that it did very differently, and you end up needing it pretty often, is you essentially got superpowers, or power-ups, where you would be able to blow up a part of the puzzle that would reveal certain pieces, and as you played, there's on a timer when these things would be available. So there's a cooldown, but if you wait long enough, they generally do come back. But it added something nice to the mix, and it changed your overall strategy because you didn't have to try to figure it all out on your own. None of them would reveal too much, I wouldn't say. All of them had relatively tight utility. I think there's 4 different power-ups. But it just gave the flow of figuring out the puzzles a different layer of strategy that I appreciated. And it was smart. And, I like the fact that they were trying to do something different. So if you're a big Picross fan, it's worth a look. I like the way that those games that are built. I think they're all the same. They just all have more puzzles. But it's a really, it's not the most. It looks very casual market / mobile game conversion. There's just a look to the animated family that you have for the game. It might be hard. It might be hard to have faith in it because it does look like a mass market in mind made game that is trying to look family friendly in a way that feels like over a decade ago kind of thing. It has an odd look, but very much worth playing and worth checking out if you love Picross, because it does things a bit differently. For 2020, my choice, and I've probably mentioned it, but I don't think I've gone on about it longer, is One Finger Death Punch 2. There is something wonderful about a game that on paper it's so simple, and in a way it doesn't feel like it should be necessarily heralded because it is so simple. You're really just having to tap a button in either direction in order to fight a bunch of oncoming enemies. You're sort of a stick figure almost, and you have different enemies coming from both sides, and you just need to have good timing to hit the attack in the right zone when they're in the right space, otherwise you'll miss. And so it's a very basic premise, and yet they did so much with it, both aesthetically, because you get different weapons as you go that can be a lot of fun, including lightsabers and like sledgehammers and katana, and you end up getting these fun weapons that have different attack animations that are fun, but it just, the further you get, the more intense and crazy it gets, because you get different types of enemies that have different sequences that you have to use to defeat them. You get ones that are shooting things like arrows at you that you may grab and shoot back, or you might just dodge them, and then those arrows will take somebody else out. But it's a very crazy kind of kung fu movie kind of action to it all. And you get some ridiculousness. Like randomly you'll just start you'll get on a tear, and it almost looks like gods are making your attacks for you with the way it looks. You'd have to see it. It's really kind of crazy. Or sometimes you'll rip somebody's heart out, or lasers will shoot out of your eyes. So it keeps things pretty interesting with that. But as simple as it looks, and as easy as you'd think it is, once it gets going and you have enemies coming at you from both sides at a pretty good clip, and you have to be accurate, like it continues to tell you that you can't button mash, and really you can't. It's the expectation is that you're going to tap precisely, because if you over tap, you're gonna miss. And if you aren't keeping track of, okay, this person I have to do left and then right, and then I have to do 2 lefts, and then I'm gonna have to do 3 in a row that are just one hits, and then I'm gonna have to do 2 in a row that are toward. So you end up having you end up having these sequences, and you end up sort of doing the math in advance. You see stuff coming, and you have to be keeping mental track of what's coming so that you very precisely do your attacks. So it's challenging in a way that's unexpected, and the animations in some cases made me laugh, or just it's just so over the top with its style, and it's just nothing feels quite like it. It's a unique, very unique beat 'em up that it just stands alone. So I appreciate games that take their own path, and I wish. I was going to say that I would say that it plays really well on mobile as well because it's simple, but there's a bug so don't get it on mobile because there's a bug that I don't think, after it's been out there and known, the bug is known, it's never been fixed to my knowledge on Android at least. I think it's like when you're in the third zone or something, you'll just get to the point where it'll just keep going. Like it's busted, which is really a shame because it plays really well on mobile as well, and I was thrilled when I saw it, but very disappointed when, like I said, way too early in the game there's a bug that just it ruins it. So on Switch it doesn't have that bug, so so definitely get it on Switch. Then for last year, 2021, my choice, it's a game called The Wild at Heart. I think I've talked about it a few times, though I think that was on Talk Nintendo podcast where I talked about it. But it's a sort of story-wise, it is sort of a coming-of-age thing, but it's really a Pikmin adventure. It has Pikmin-like elements for the puzzle solving and for the figuring out how to get past obstacles. There's definitely a Pikmin vibe to it, but it's very much an adventure. Where you're talking to people, so it very different vibe from Pikmin, and more Pikmin-like than say Tinykin, which just came out, which really is more of a 3D platformer first, and a Pikmin game second. But there's just something about The Wild at Heart that charmed me, and it just felt like a very, like I said, the mix of the story and just the flow of it. Sorry. It really stood out in a year of games that were really good for a variety of reasons. It just, for whatever reason, it really captured me, and I mean, I enjoy the Pikmin series, and the silliness of it, and it felt like a smart way of reusing a concept. I hadn't really seen anybody go that route to make a Pikmin-like game, but with a different sort of genre feel to it, with the way it works. So that, I don't know, that always has an appeal to me. I like people re-leveraging good ideas in ways that feel very different, and just The Wild Heart felt very different. Its story and its flow, just a very different kind of thing, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a smart and well-made game, and like I said, the story I thought was a good one. So there's my list. If there's one from this year that I think deserves accolades so far that I don't think got as much credit as it deserves, so far that would be Nobody Saves the World, the latest game by Drinkbox, the people who had made the Guacamelee games. And I know I've mentioned Nobody Saves the World before, but it is one of those where it pains me that I think that people kind of appreciated it, but it feels like critically it was sort of a swing and a miss for a lot of people, or it just didn't, or it was okay, but they just didn't tout it enough. I really consider that to be one of the best games that I've played on Switch. And I can see why people didn't connect with it in some ways, because of it. It is odd, and developing all the different forms that you can take to the point that you can unlock all of them, to unlock all the forms and unlock the dragon. That takes quite a lot of work, and you have to do quite a bit of, it's sort of grinding, but not really. But the fact that the quests a lot of the time were very smart. There are a couple examples of a special ability that seems pretty useless most of the time to use in combat, but it ends up being something essential in order for you to complete a quest. There are quite a few dungeons that have requirements like that. But I like the idea of the different classes are all very weird. There's some really strange ones that play really well, and you don't end up sort of sticking with the same form throughout the game very often, or at least not for long. And you tend to switch out to have different abilities. Even if you like the bodybuilder, or you like the mermaid, you're the fact that you can remix and give them abilities from other people, you can be pretty formidable. But the way that the game is structured with the dungeons, that you're going to have to be able to cover X number of types of attacks. So you can't just go in with what you prefer. You really need to gear toward the dungeon and make the most of the abilities that you have that satisfy. You need a poison. You need something that's going to deal with poison. You need something that's going to deal with sort of a brute force stomp kind of thing. I don't remember what type that was, but so you could go with a class of character that has as its base some of those attacks, or you could end up taking something completely different that doesn't have any of those abilities that would counter those concerns, and load them up with abilities that do. So it gives you a great deal of versatility, and it's hard. It's legit challenging. Plays great with co-op. I enjoyed playing it with my wife for quite a while. That is a lot easier playing with somebody else, because you don't have to try to make yourself a Swiss Army knife for more complicated dungeons. You can each split up the important abilities for attacks, and you just need to then be sure that when you see that somebody needs to be hit with this specific type of ability, that the right person goes attacks them first, so that they can wear down their resistance, and then both of you can wail on them. But yeah, just a really smart design. It's quirky and funny. It reminds me a lot of Guacamelee with things like that I enjoy about it. But just pretty brilliantly set up, and surprisingly long. I almost finished it on PC, and then I almost finished it on Switch. I don't think I've actually finished it. I don't think I ever got the time, and I'd probably finish it on PC because I got deeper in on PC, where I'd unlocked the dragon and stuff like that. And they have DLC free DLC that may have I don't remember if it just came out or if it's coming out. So maybe I have enough of an excuse to go back to it. But anyway, so that was only question one. So moving on to the second question. Reactions to the latest Nintendo Direct. I'll go through them. Most of it's going to seem pretty depressing and me dismissing a lot of games. But for me, the non-indie oriented directs, it's always tough because it ends up being a lot of games that I some of which I'm impressed by and some of which I would like, but just I've come to accept sort of the fate of having so many indie games on my plate on a weekly basis that it makes it really hard to want to spend money to get a AAA game that I know that unless it's something that I'm going to play with my wife specifically or my kids, unless it's one of those that I'm going to play with them, it becomes really hard to want to invest because I know that I'm just not going to put the time into it. Even if I would finish it, that I would finish it in a way that is rushed. So we'll go through the list of the ones that for whatever reason made an impression. Like right off the bat with the new Fire Emblem game. Fire Emblem is not a franchise I ever got into because of my time constraints. I don't ever see getting into because by its nature, it's a longer kind of game like Xenoblade Chronicles. It's a huge RPG that is known for being, incredibly long. Yeah, I'm never going to pick it up. There's no chance of me picking it up. Um, so they look impressive, and perhaps I'd even enjoy them. Um, Strategy, I tend to, if I play strategy games, I tend to really gravitate toward XCOM. I always find XCOM games really satisfying. I But tactical games outside of something like XCOM, I don't know. It's never they've never really been as much interest. Like, I know people love the Advance Wars series, and I did have a few of those when they were on Game Boy Advance. I think it was Advance Wars where I played it, and I had a sequel, one of the other ones. Um, like, I don't mind them, and they were good. I got it because it was at the time I was taking my daughters to gymnastics practice on a regular basis, and I needed something that would occupy me. So it worked well for that, but I wouldn't say it's a series that I'm like dying to go play. If I had my druthers, especially now where I have so many options, that would be lower on my list. That style of tactics game. So yeah, Fire Emblem. I will say I would never get it, but Fitness Boxing, Fist of the North Star, just that is the most whacked out, funny, strange. Like, it's funny that it exists at all, but the fact that Nintendo put it in their direct is just it makes my jaw drop. I mean, like, you just end up thinking to yourself, has anybody at Nintendo seen Fist of the North Star? Like, that movie is so incredibly violent. Like, it's just so strange. Like, that, I don't know. That really amused me. I spent years in the Nintendo 64 era and stuff, defending Nintendo's right to have the stance of no blood in Mortal Kombat. I didn't necessarily agree with their approach, but I could I could agree that they had a right to do it, and as long as they were willing to take the hit, and they did for a long time. They took the hit for not being willing to compromise and to allow mature rated games and stuff. That was their stance for so long, and it is very strange now to play some of the games that have come to Switch that are so not classic Nintendo in any way, shape, or form. Very surprising to find on a Nintendo system, and yet that's good. And people, it's a big eShop. There are ratings on things for a reason. Usually the really obvious games that are not appropriate for kids are easy to find, and to Nintendo's credit, they haven't completely given up, they either haven't completely given up and allowed like some of the really, really crazy / gross stuff that I've seen on Steam. It hasn't gotten to that point, so I don't know if that's Nintendo filtering or if just those game makers have not tried to bring those kinds of things to Nintendo or not. But yeah, it is the Fist of the North Star thing. Just that whole movie treated people like hefty bags full of blood to just erupt like at any point. Just that game, that movie is so incredibly violent. So yeah, it was really strange to see that. Tunic, theoretically, I would love to cover it. Since I haven't gotten a code for it, maybe I'll get late codes if they have a second round. But it's the tough thing of these indie games that get a lot of press and get a lot of exposure. You get these outlets that don't normally cover indie games at all, popping out of the woodwork to get the big game. So I'm not holding my breath. It's one of those that I would consider buying. It does look that promising. I've heard too many good things from too many people not to have an interest in it. But then it puts it in that what I consider difficult category. Games that I've had before like that, Celeste and Hollow Knight, where I didn't get codes for it. I don't like not having them in the lists, but I don't like. I get strange about providing coverage for games that I wasn't given. Sort of putting my time into games that I wasn't given codes for when I have plenty of games where I was. I get very conflicted about how to approach that. It's not an ego thing of, how dare they not give me a code. It becomes a fairness to the ones that did. Me taking the time to properly cover a game that I wasn't given a code for, when I've got 10, 15 games that are all waiting for me to put my attention into them, I get very, like I said, I get a very heavy conflict of interest thing in there, feeling. And so like in the case of Celeste and Hollow Knight, I bought them, I played them enough to have an opinion on them, but I never reviewed them, and they're in the top list essentially with a note saying that they're there more on force of reputation than they are based on me having a deep love for them. Because I just, it is a tough thing. It is a tough thing trying to balance, what I consider my personal playing time, which is pretty limited, and trying to be fair to all the games that I get codes for, even the ones that aren't great. They deserve me spending enough time with them to give them a fair shake. So again, like buying a sure thing, like buying Celeste, obviously it's a well regarded and it's a good game, but buying it and then spending time to put it through the paces properly and review it, and give it exposure. It doesn't need it, thankfully, so I don't feel that conflicted on that. But it just, I feel like it's almost like cheating on the games that the people that did send me codes, that they deserve my attention first. So I'm hoping I would somehow get a code for Tunic. It's going to be really awkward having to go through that again, where I'm going to buy it by force of reputation, and I'll probably end up listing it by force of reputation in the genre list. I usually won't put them in the yearly list because I didn't really play it that way, so I don't, I sort of disqualify it. I just, for the genre lists, not having Hollow Knight and Celeste in particular felt like those things are just, they're too popular, they're too good, and not acknowledging them. Luckily, I got codes for things like Dead Cells and Hades, because again, I would be in that boat of, like, Hades in particular. Hades is great to the point that, it's possibly one of the best games on the system. So to try to have lists that don't acknowledge it would have been painful. So yeah, it's one of those things. So yeah, Tunic, would love to play it, absolutely. If I don't get a code for it, I don't know what I'll do. I'll probably buy it at some point and play it enough, but again, I definitely have a hard time with those kinds of things. For Nintendo Online, the new N64 titles, very excited to see 1080 snowboarding. I enjoyed that a lot, just like I enjoyed Wave Race. So now I've got two games from the N64 library that are trying to tempt me. Some of the other games that they had, like Goldeneye, I never played that much multiplayer in it. I know that going back to that, the control scheme is going to have to be kind of janky. I can't imagine that they, I don't know. I can't imagine that they completely reinvented the way controls work for Goldeneye in order to maintain some semblance of its original. Because it's a great game. I loved it, but it is janky. It's certainly, and I have had to go back to the graveyard level with Natalia, failing to follow you and getting killed, and like I remember that level being just so painful. There were a couple spots, like there were a couple stages like that, but I remember that stage in particular, just wanting to choke whoever wrote the pathfinding AI for Natalia, because it was just so aggravating. That was the worst level. But I think the game that would put me over the top for N64 stuff and make me get Nintendo Online the expanded pass would be if they get Blast Core, I'm gonna have to get it. If they have Blast Core, I adore Blast Core. Just I remember, and I reviewed it, and I was finding codes for it. So it's an odd game where I shotgun through the entire thing. I think that was when it was still N64 HQ, that era. I'd gotten it. I bought it myself, but I was reviewing it anyway. And I shotgunned through that whole game and unlocked everything in the first. It was over a weekend, and I think it was by Sunday I'd unlocked the moon and all the extended planets, because I think we were putting out there, because we were updating on a weekend. I think we were putting out there that that the moon and the planets were all out there. Before anybody else had said anything about it. It was like, this is amazing. There's so much to this. But those dump truck levels where you had to swerve, those tended to scare people off and hold people up. But I got a knack for that. And then, when you started playing on the moon, I was already blown away with the moon levels, and the fact that, the gravity being different really affected how you played, and it made it a lot more fun in a lot of ways. But then after that, then to unlock all the planets, I was just like jaw dropped. It was like, wow. But yeah, love the mix of action and puzzles and destroying everything. Yeah. Blast Core. So yeah, Nintendo, if you're somehow, for whatever strange reason, listening on a whim, get back Blast Core on there, and you'll gain me as a extended pack subscriber. I know you're very worried about that, so get right on that. Then Pikmin 4, as I said before, have a great deal of love for Pikmin. It's a great series, plays really well. Odds of me buying it, pretty much none. Because, yeah. And then Legend of Zelda, whether it's Tears of the Kingdom or Tears of the Kingdom, that'll be interesting. I'm interested to see if they make it Tears, or if they're going for the sort of the double meaning. I am very interested to see it and to hear the lore. Breath of the Wild is definitely one of the best games I've ever played, but for all the same reasons with conflict, with something even at the scale of Tunic, Legend of Zelda is even bigger. I don't know if I'll take the plunge, because I would feel like I was wasting money. That it's a game that I'm not going to put the time into it or the care into playing it that I could, and it's going to just draw my attention away from all the games I'm given codes for that are expecting me to. There's a fair expectation that I'm going to put the time into it to understand the game and to be fair to it. So, creating a conflict of interest for myself never feels very fair. So. The perils of reviewing tons and tons and tons of games. It sounds great, but it does make you a bit jaded, and it makes every moment that you're playing games, it makes you think about what you're playing and why you're playing it and whether or not you should be playing something else. It's different. All right, and then David's final question was, has there ever been a game that you were otherwise enjoying, you quit deep into the game due to a difficulty spike that left you too frustrated to continue? Well, first, with a lot of the indie games, I don't tend to finish them. I do finish a proportion of them, but it tends to be ones that really have some appeal that's different, that feels different. So I'm compelled to finish them. So me finishing games in general, there's a lot of reasons I quit them, but not always because they're hard. So I have two examples of games that I've played over time that sort of fall into this category for different reasons and different outcomes. The first one's Goner. Goner is a really hard game to start. It's frustrating to begin with until you get more of the heads, and until you get more of the backpacks, and until you get more of the weapons. Goner can be a really aggravatingly difficult game, but if you get the scythe and the shark fin, and then mix it with the head that gives you an extra hit, you can do some real damage and the fun of Goner is getting a ridiculous chain of kills, and the whole game just starts going berserk. Like there's something so cool about that. Like it goes to black and white, and the music continues to get faster and more intense. But it is a game I've never finished. I've faced the final boss a couple, more than a couple times. Never have been able to beat it. It's one of those tough things that getting to the boss is already painful enough, and it's not something I was able to do just at will or consistently. And then it was one of those things that you'd debate. Okay, well, maybe the problem is that while this combination of backpack, head, and weapon did really well to get me to the last boss, maybe it's not the ideal equipment to be fighting the last boss. So, and I never looked up people giving you clues of saying, the best build's this. I never looked any of that up because I just wanted to beat it pure kind of thing. And maybe sometime I'll get back into it again to give it a shot, but I haven't for quite a while. The other game, and this is a game that predated the Switch, I was playing it on PC and never had beaten it, and then played it quite a bit on Switch and hadn't beaten it. Nuclear Throne. Love that game. Tough as hell roguelike shooter. I consider it's that one where I consider it better than Enter the Gungeon, and I consider that a big roguelike shooter like distinction of are you an Enter the Gungeon person, are you a Nuclear Throne person, and maybe there's another one in that mix too, but there definitely seem to be two different tastes and opinions between those two particular games. But I had never beaten Nuclear Throne, and I actually sort of accidentally beat it, like in a sense that I was just in a tear where I was in my free downtime, just as my blow off every mentally, just get so in the zone on a game and just play it like I was playing Nuclear Throne heavily, and just I got onto this tear, and I'd gotten close. I'd gotten to the throne room, and I'd died so quickly. Usually, I didn't really even know what was going on, but got to the throne, and was just on, and had the right build, had the right combination of stuff, and stuck in there and beat the game. And it was like, it's so cool when you suddenly, after you've been playing it so long, and something like a roguelike where it's just just disappointment after disappointment, getting your ass handed to you over and over and over again, and then to beat it was just, and like I said, it was sort of unexpected. I wasn't focused on winning. I was just focused on enjoying myself, and to end up getting to the end and winning or defeating the throne was a big plus. So yeah, Goner, I need to get back to it. But thank you to David for the questions for this week. Gave me something to ramble about for a while. Just as a note, I'm out of questions, so there may not be ever a TalkiNindies episode 8. I know that may actually make a lot of you happy, but for the ones that don't, for the ones that want more, for whatever strange reason, I need more questions. So thank you for everybody who's listening to this point. Thank you, David. And thank you to the people who've contributed to this point. But if you'd like to hear more, be sure to send me questions to Justin at, well, you can either do Justin at Nindie Spotlight, or I think I actually set up an alias for TalkiNindies, but maybe the spelling will throw people off. So just make it Justin at nindiespotlight.com. It'll be easier. But thank you, everybody, for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you.